Bloomberg Audio Studios.
Podcasts, radio, news.
From the heart of where innovation, money, and power collide in Silicon Valley and beyond, this is Bloomberg Technology with Caroline Hyde and Ed Ludlow.
Hyde at Bloomberg's World Headquarters in New York.
And I'm Ed Ludlow, live from Dell Technologies World in Las Vegas. This is Bloomberg Technology.
And we will have full coverage from Las Vegas with Ed as he gears up to speak with the CEOs of Dell, of ServiceNow, and of Nvidia. Plus, we'll hone in on Nvidia and get a preview of what to expect from their earnings out later in the week. Meanwhile, Grayscale CEO Michael Sonnenschein departing the company after 3 years at the helm. We'll discuss that and so much more throughout this hour. But a quick check on the macro as we see record high after record high across those benchmarks, whether it's the NASDAQ, whether or not it's the S&P 500, the Dow, the all-country world index, all power higher on the fact that we're still seeing perhaps that geopolitical risk, of course, a fatal crash happening with a helicopter in Iran, not enough to take away some of the overall focus that is, of course, a macro policy, a Federal Reserve that can potentially cut rates into the second half of the year. That's what the market wants to see. That's interesting. We're seeing a little bit of sell-off coming in the bond market, yields just pushing up, call it 1 or 2 basis points. But really some quietness as we have just a lot of Fed speak to digest this week. I'm looking at copper also at a record high, metals, gold, copper, really maybe a bit of a conundrum when it comes to inflationary pressures, though, for the Federal Reserve to currently digest. But nevertheless, record highs over in commodity space, too. Move on, what's happening in the world of crypto. We're seeing that risk on sentiment filter into Bitcoin. We're up more than a percentage point. 66,900 is about where we trade. But then I want to delve into some of the individual movers, some of the micro names. Look, we brace ourselves for what is an all-important company for earnings. We're still waiting. One of the last ones when it comes to the big market cap companies. Nvidia up more than 2%. It is, of course, Wednesday that we get the overall numbers from this company, and many anticipating that will they be able to vindicate the 61 analysts who still say buy this stock and the 0 sells that are out there after a more than 500% rally since the beginning of 2023. Dell just under pressure, some 0.4%. Interesting that JP Morgan is actually saying also look to buy into this stock ahead of its earnings coming later on May, the very last day it seems. 148, well, the price target for JP Morgan moves up to 155. We want to talk more about these stocks. We want to talk more about the focus of artificial intelligence for both Dell, for Nvidia, for many. I'm over into Dell World Conference now. It is just kicking off in Las Vegas. Ed, you are there, and you've got a special guest.
Yeah, and by the way, the relationship between those two companies, it's such a big part of the AI infrastructure build-out that we're seeing. So let's kick off our coverage of Dell Tech World and bring in Arthur Lewis. He's the president of Dell's Infrastructure Solutions Group. And the reality is that we can talk about generative AI all day long, but that is what we're talking about still, the infrastructure play. This is a big event for lots of reasons. Set the scene for us. Who is coming, and what do you think you'll be talking most about?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me here. It's great to be here. We're excited to be here with 10,000 of our closest friends, customers, partners, press, and analysts to talk about all of the great things that we're working on. There's no question that we're living in one of the most interesting times in human history. The rapid advancements that we see in artificial intelligence are going to really unlock the value that the world's data brings to organizations of all sizes, unlocking record levels of innovation and record levels of workforce productivity. And so you're going to hear from a lot of great partners, stories around the acceleration of their generative AI. You're going to hear from companies like ServiceNow, companies like Samsung. You're going to hear about our partnerships with companies like Nvidia, Broadcom, Intel, Microsoft. It's just going to be a very exciting, action-packed show.
Let's talk about AI factories. So in March, Dell said, we are trying to simplify your investments into artificial intelligence. So we bring you the AI factory. What is an AI factory? All right, so
artificial intelligence is very challenging given the rapid rate of innovation that we see in this space. And so we take a very consultative approach and in terms of how we build out our factories. What customers are looking for is, hey, I really need help on the use case I'm targeting. I really need help on how I do my model selection. I need help on how I do data prep, on my architecture, on my infrastructure. And so we bring that strategy to bear in our our AI factory, which is a combination of our infrastructure, compute, networking, and storage, all engineered and optimized under one roof. Our build out of the partner ecosystem, you're going to hear from great companies like Hugging Face and Meta, the partnerships that we have there, and our professional and consulting services, which really help customers accelerate their deployment of artificial intelligence.
The big question that we're going to have throughout the day is who is the buyer of AI factories, right? The story thus far has been Nvidia selling AI accelerators or high-performance GPUs to the hyperscalers and Meta, basically. Dell's history in its sales channels have been different, right? You sell to SMEs, you sell to governments. Are they the buyers of the AI factory, and in what form? What are we literally talking about here?
Yeah, and like I said, this is one of the most interesting times in human history. A lot of people say we're in the early innings of a baseball game, but I like to say that we're actually just pulling into the stadium and the game hasn't even started. A lot of the hype has really been around the cloud service providers and building out large training clusters. But the enterprise is definitely doing a lot of POCs. What they're looking for is to deploy AI the right way. That means they want to deploy it on-prem, aligned to where their data resides, and they want to do it in an open and flexible way because they want choice in terms of how, when, and where they deploy their models.
The PowerEdge 9680 was the basically fastest selling Dell product, or fastest to $1 billion, which was an exciting headline, right? But what drove that? Why was it so fast selling relative to your server history, which is rich? Yeah.
So again, we leveraged, we like to say our innovation engine is firing on all cylinders. We run the engine extremely hot. And the 9680 is differentiated in the marketplace for several reasons. It's the densest 6U chassis that exists in the industry, and it's one chassis to support a bunch of silicon diversity. So GPUs from Nvidia, from AMD, from Gaudi, all in the same design. So we have consistent rack scale design for operational simplicity. We've worked hard on our networking capabilities to offer Ethernet and InfiniBand for full maximum throughput. So it's really the best solution out there for generative AI.
Arthur, how are you using generative AI tools? At home, at work? Talk to me about how you use them.
Yeah, so we're focused on 4 use cases right now.
You as a human, as an executive, as a person.
Well, I've been using it. Obviously, Meta has some great generative AI. I've been using it with the family on Instagram, on Facebook, on WhatsApp, on Messenger. The innovation in this space is happening so rapidly. It's one of the most interesting times in human histories, and I'm just lucky to be part of it.
You said something interesting a moment ago, which is about the server design accommodates for different GPUs. It's GPU agnostic in many ways. And everyone keeps telling me that choice matters, the ability to use different AI accelerators. But Nvidia is still, a clear leader in this market. Your job is to have really clear interaction with public and private sector customers.
Yes.
How micro-focused are they on Nvidia versus an AMD or an Intel in the conversations that you have?
Look, customers are looking for a trusted advisor, and that's who we are. We understand this landscape better than anybody out there. We understand the compute, we understand the network, we understand the storage, we understand the ecosystem, we understand all of the services. Our job is to go in, really understand what the customer is looking to accomplish, and provide the best solution for the customer.
Arthur Lewis, who is president of the Infrastructure Solutions Group, or ISG as it's more commonly known at Dell. Thank you for kicking off Dell Technologies World with us live here in Las Vegas. Caroline.
What a great conversation. Such a great way to warm us up as we think about the infrastructure build out and indeed the way in which every executive is using this powerful technology. The last of the so-called Magnificent Seven stocks reporting Wednesday, Nvidia. And boy, is it important to the overall stock market. It's a make or break moment, really, in entirety, as it is, the third major player when it comes to the NASDAQ 100 in terms of market capitalization. And look, we want to see how much there is a commitment to AI chips, to infrastructure build-out, to buying the company's products. Joining us now for a preview of what to expect, Kunjan Sabani, who is Bloomberg Intelligence Analyst. And look, it's not often that we're anticipating revenue growth in excess of 200%. Again, for a company. How can we live up to it?
Yeah, I mean, look, there has been no lack of demand validating signals throughout this last quarter. Its largest customers, the cloud providers, hyperscalers, have all increased their outlook for their CapEx spending in AI this year. Its supplier, the biggest supplier, TSMC, has given really positive commentary about AI demand continuing for the rest of the year. When you look, there's a couple of other tailwinds, as in sovereign entities and other regions outside of the US government entities increasing their spending in AI. So across the board, we see significant, strong, real demand signals coming in for the company, and we feel really good about them coming in this a solid beat and raise this print.
Supply as well going to be equally strong? Because that seems to have been the limitation really for the story of Nvidia.
Yeah, I mean, look, supply has been coming on significantly each quarter, and that's what we expect. Definitely, as so far, they have executed really well without any big miss, I would say, in terms of supply coming on to the numbers, at least what the street has. So at this point, we don't see significant risk. Look, again, this quarter, we saw H100 lead times reduce or close to about 9 to 10 weeks. They now have the H200 in the mix as well. And coming over this end of second half of this, they'll have more products from their Blackwell architecture in the mix as well. So they have more levers to play with now in order to sort of meet those numbers if one of the supply chain sees any issues.
Let's talk geopolitics as well, because you focus in on the incredibly powerful chips and overall architecture being on offer. But China, for example, big customer, and it doesn't want, or at least it can't have, the most powerful chips that Nvidia produces.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think in the near term, the geopolitical is, in a way, I don't want to say directly, but could be a positive. Yes, the China regional preference is not to use Nvidia chips, but when you still think about the customers in China, they would still, if they can, want to use Nvidia chips because they are the best out there. So we could anticipate to see some sort of a pull-in fear of more restrictions coming either from China or the US. So that could sort of pull in the demand a little bit early and help Nvidia in the next few quarters.
What's interesting is we had an AI cloud computing startup on the show on Friday, CoreWeave, raising a ton of money, but it's mainly working with Nvidia here. And the CEO telling us that everyone wants an Nvidia chip. Yes, you can talk about AMD. Yes, you can talk about some of the competitors in the market, but ultimately that's where the demand is. Do you agree? Is there anyone who's starting to show the competition angle, able to muscle in on some of the market share?
I mean, like you name it, AMD is sort of the only other real viable merchant GPU silicon provider right now. But Nvidia still has the lion's share, and we don't see that changing significantly this year or next fiscal year.
What has been, of course, one of the key bottlenecks for many in terms of the overall power of generative AI has been energy, and it's been supply side to chips. How much is that something we're likely to hear discussed on the call, analyst consideration, that really this is now the one that needs fixing, ultimately, the impact on the environment or indeed impact on the cost of energy?
I mean, it has become a rising concern across the board. I don't think we'll hear a lot about that in NVIDIA calls specific. I think we hear a lot about in its customers' calls, to be honest, at this point, because even if a real magnitude increase in power every generation of NVIDIA chips, their total TCO continues to get better and the efficiency continues to get better.
We thank you, Kunjan. It's going to be a busy week for you. Kunjan Sarvani on the show from Bloomberg Intelligence. All eyes on Nvidia and its earnings later in the week. But coming up, we've got to focus on what's happening in the here and now with Tesla. Employees are in limbo still as job cuts loom over at the company. We'll discuss really the details of the anxiety that's still gripping the electric car makers' workforce. That's next. This is Bloomberg Technology. Time now for Talking Tech. First up, OpenAI. It's working to halt the use of the voice known as Sky in its audible version of ChatGPT after users have noticed that it sounds remarkably similar to actress Scarlett Johansson. Now, in a blog post, OpenAI said the voice, one of 5 available, remember, wasn't chosen to be an imitation of the Hollywood actress, and the voices are a new feature, of course, of ChatGPT, introduced in GPT 4.0, which debuted earlier in the month. We're going to have so much more on this story later in the show. Meanwhile, CyberArk Software has agreed to buy cybersecurity firm Venafi for $1.5 billion in cash and stock. Venafi, backed by PE firm Thoma Bravo, focuses on machine identity management, with clients ranging from the US health insurers to airlines to card issuers and banks. Now, according to CyberArk, the acquisition is expected to close in the second half of 2024. It's going to add $150 million in an annual recurring revenue. Plus, ByteDance, that overtakes Baidu for AI chatbot dominance. Released in August, downloads of the chatbot Doubo surpassed its rivals and now have more regular monthly users in iOS in China. Now, that is according to the data from Sensor Tower. The TikTok parent company has made a priority in catching up with artificial intelligence, and its chatbot is becoming the most downloaded AI chatbot on Apple, with over 9 million downloads to date. And shares of Keyword Studios rose the most since it went public in 2013 after the company disclosed that it is in advanced takeover talks with the EQT Group and could value the company at over $2.5 billion. Now, the Dublin-based studio provides game development, audio, art services to the gaming industry, and it's worked on titles including Fortnite and the Call of Duty series. Now, let's talk about what's been happening over the past month in Elon Musk's plans to slash at least 10% of Tesla's workforce. The CEO still isn't done yet, leaving many employees basically in fear of when they might be cut next. Joining us to break it all down in the latest news is Bloomberg's Craig Trudell. And Craig, I can only imagine how anxiety-inducing it is to just be waiting for that letter, that email.
Yeah, and it is a case that this is just, sort of a week-to-week thing, day-to-day thing for employees of you just don't know when sort of that tap on the shoulder, or in the case of Tesla, the as we put it in the story today, the Dear Employee email. Employees getting these messages that don't address them by name, that, reveal that they are leaving the company, that they're being let go. This is just something that's, continued to roll for weeks and weeks now, and we report exclusively in this story that it is something that is expected to continue at least through June. So this is a company that, as we know, has been going through a lot of tumult, and some of this has very much been self-inflicted and sort of raises questions about, execution in the midst of this, sort of cloud hanging over your head every day if you're working at Tesla.
I mean, morale must be taking a hit, Craig. And I'm interested in also the confusion that has reigned around the supercharger team, for example, the fact that that was axed and then seemingly brought back in some sort of guise. How committed to overall job cuts does the company seem to be?
I think that particular aspect of these job cuts has been really disruptive, and also just, really raised a lot of questions about what the heck is going on here, because it is kind of a crown jewel within the company. It may or may not have been necessarily making a ton of money for the company directly, but the fact that they were able to offer such a superior charging experience to other charging networks, and even able to get, the rest of the industry to jump on board with their plug design. I mean, that just was a show of force on the part of the company last year, that they were literally able to get the entire industry to say, you know what, this is the better plug. We'd like to be able to use Tesla's network. And, the industry is still pursuing that in spite of the fact that, some of these companies have not been able to get anybody on the phone who runs that part of the business, which is, really, an issue for these companies, given the bet that they're making here.
Craig, let's play devil's advocate and try and focus in who's still passionate, who's still working, who's still enthused to be building over at Tesla, because it is still for many a completely earth-altering kind of a business to be playing a part in. Is anyone still feeling galvanized?
I think Musk is actually, interestingly, trying to push that just in the last few days on X. He's engaging with people who are sort of, calling out the idea that the media was predicting Twitter's demise, when he came into that company and slashed its workforce. And a lot of his, fans on there are kind of, speaking to this idea of, everything's fine, nothing has gone wrong. I think, that is, an interesting thing for him to be sort of engaging engaging with just in the last few days, and I think may or may not be a sort of nod to this idea that there are very similar tropes showing up in the way that these job cuts are being reported, both internally and externally among the media. But I would just note that this is not just the media reporting this. This is current or former Tesla employees describing this sort of state of affairs at the moment.
Yeah, taking to LinkedIn to really talk about how painful this is as an individual, how this affects your family and your mental health. Let's just think about whether it affects demand, though, Craig, because for many, this does impact the brand.
Yeah, and I think there's a very interesting question about whether or not the company is able to execute in spite of all this. We within this story speak to this idea that the sales staff is being affected. There were some workers that flagged the idea that because they were cut, they had a real concern about whether or not that was going to have an effect on the ability of the company to close deals, to bring the customer along the journey of coming to grips with spending tens of thousands of dollars on a Tesla as opposed to the growing number of options that are now in the EV market. And so that is really going to be something to watch when this company reports second quarter deliveries, because it also Musk set a high bar and said, what, we think the second quarter will be much better than the first quarter. The first quarter was dismal, and whether or not they can execute is really going to be important.
We keep an eye, always looking for the data. Craig Trudell, thank you for the insights. It's a great read. Welcome back to Bloomberg Technology. I'm Caroline Hyde in New York, and we're getting you a check on these markets, which are macro-fueled in many ways. We are still digesting a lot of Fed speak at the moment. We're anticipating quiet on the data front, more on the speaking front, and of course, a desire to be still buying into stocks at the moment if you think the Fed might cut going into the rest of the year. NASDAQ 100 up 0.6%. Record high. Not record high. We're at a record high when it comes to the All-Country World Index. We're seeing powering higher across the world, up 0.3%. Sure, Europe, as it closes, is not on a record high for the stock 600, but certainly the S&P, the NASDAQ, and indeed the Dow are all at record highs today. I'm looking at Bitcoin up 1.7%. The moon music is positive despite still some of those geopolitical risks. Let's move on and look at some of the individual companies that we're shining a light on, because Tesla off by 1.7%. We were just hearing some of the concerns around ongoing hit to morale and, of course, job cuts still being tested and executed over at the business. We're looking at what's happening, though, with Wix, up 21%. Look, earnings are still happening. This is a web platform company. Its best day since March 2020, as it manages to blow away in terms of analyst expectations and also raises its full-year forecasts. Nvidia, up 2.3%. This is the name we're all waiting for when it comes to earnings. It's coming out May 22nd after the bell. And look, there's 0 analysts that have a sell rating on this stock, despite up more than 500% since the beginning of 2023. The bets are on still when it comes to artificial intelligence and still managing to weather those geopolitical tensions when it comes to China. Let's dig into Nvidia, into AI, how we're using it in our world and our life over in Las Vegas, because it's Dell's World Conference. We await the news coming from Dell's CEO, keynote speech later today. Ed, you are over there and you've got a key guest.
Yeah, we have a key guest, and that is President and Principal Analyst at Creative Strategies, Carolina Milanesi. And you have so much experience covering consumer technology, 15 years of it, if you don't mind me saying. This is actually my first Dell Tech World. I'm sure it is not your first, but everyone that I bumped into at the airport, on the flight, that phoned me last week was like, this is actually very big. The stakes are very high here. Also in the enterprise context. Why is that this time around?
Because I don't think that we heard the word enough this morning. So let's say AI is here, and every company is trying to understand how they can rethink their business to take advantage of AI. And because of that, they need a good partner.
We will talk about AI PC, but the story, frankly, with generative AI is Nvidia selling the H100 generation AI accelerator or high-performance GPU to the hyperscalers and Meta. And I don't see much evolution beyond that. Do you?
It's a bit like a duck, right? That is moving and you don't see the feet paddling under the water. And I think that's what the likes of Dell are doing. For enterprises, is the day-to-day, is how to really take advantage of AI to rethink their business, do better productivity, reach people that they haven't reached before. And that requires attention on the day-to-day. So thinking about the role that Dell can play as a trusted partner and supplier is really help optimize workloads and take advantage of AI in the right way, whether it is in the cloud or at the edge.
And I suppose Jensen Huang and Nvidia, he's not been selling anything at any point in his career to the public sector, the micro level. Look, I grew up in a Dell household with Dell desktops. I broke many of them playing Age of Empires on CD-ROM. When I think AI PC, I keep hearing it's coming. I don't really know in my mind or my heart that I know what an AI PC is.
And I think most consumers don't, right? For me, the really true selling proposition of AI PC is the idea that you're lowering the barrier of entry for people to interact with technology. And so because of generative AI, everybody can become a power user, taking away the friction that we still have on the PC that maybe we don't have anymore on the phone.
I don't know that the consumer's ready. Often when a new technology comes to market, it's expensive and it goes down from there. And I wonder, is Dell the OEM or whichever chip maker it is, and there are several of them eyeing this space, maybe do they eat the cost to make it more palatable for the consumer to try it out,
I think with AI, there are two parts, right? There's the cost of the hardware and then there's the cost of the service. And so as far as eating their price or the part of their return is both on the Microsoft, on Copilot, as well as it is on the chip maker and OEMs. What is good is that we're seeing, for instance, the likes of Qualcomm have a broader set of offering that hits the main market, the mainstream market, and the early adopters. Are consumers ready? No. We need to tell an honest story of what AI is and what real AI is, when real AI is going to hit the market, because this is a marathon. It's not a sprint. It's going to take years to actually see the full value of AI.
And Carolina, can you explain to me, therefore, why I need an AI PC or AI at the edge rather than just using an app, the latest bot, the latest ChatGPT competitor?
There are a couple of things. There AI working on the actual exchange between you as a consumer or user and the PC and the hardware. But then there's also, from a privacy perspective, the idea that having AI on the edge allows you not to send your data to the cloud. So there's a privacy play and there's a latency play. And to be honest, there's a cost play that it comes in, especially from a services perspective, right? That running all these workloads in the cloud is going to be expensive, and somebody's going to have to pay for the investment that the vendors are making.
Yeah, at the moment it's being sucked up by, the hyperscalers and the companies that they're helping offer some of the freer access to compute. Carolina, I'm interested in particularly your role, because I love the turn of phrase that you said, everyone can become a power user. When you're using AI, you are quite literally a user of power as well, and you're really focusing on environmental, social governance strategies for some of these tech players. Is energy becoming the number one thing that people are starting to talk about?
100%. And I think that we need to talk more about it, because we hear a lot about AI helping sustainability, but AI comes at a cost as well from a sustainability perspective. And so that intersection between the energy consumption that AI will require and also the benefit that AI will bring in optimizing, like the grid as an example, is something that we need to talk more about.
Carolina, Dell is celebrating its 40th year. This is a really important event, but are they celebrating it in a position of strength in this market?
I think they do. As a company, they're very well trusted, as I said, by the customers and partners. They have really helped through digital transformations for years. They really did well during COVID, helping their customers through a very tough period. And as a company, they have great leadership. I think when you have a founder that is still driving the day-to-day of a company company, the things are different. And they are strong on ESG as well. As Caroline said, I care a lot about DE&I and sustainability, and they are a great company in that respect, doing great work.
Carolina Milanesi, Creative Strategies President, Principal Analyst, and I actually took a lot from that I think I can carry over into the conversation with Michael Dell, Jensen Huang, and Bill McDermott later today. Caroline, back to you in New York.
So cannot wait for that conversation. It was a great one with Carolina. Meanwhile, coming up, we've got some more conversing to do about Grayscale. The CEO, Michael Sonnenschein, departing the company after helping build it into the world's largest crypto asset manager. Details next. Meanwhile, let's have a quick look at Instacart to break. There is a big conference going on in Boston as well, the JP Morgan Tech Conference. And Instacart, the CFO, has been speaking, and looks as though Emily Reuter not having the best of implications on the stock right now. We're down by more than 5%. They're saying basically they do not expect to exceed their overall total transaction volume. Their gross transaction volume guidance will not be exceeded, it seems to be saying. They want to be able to deliver, though, on their EBITDA with some flexibility. So perhaps a little bit of nervousness creeping in there. From New York, from Las Vegas, this is Bloomberg Technology. About some roles changing. After helping build Grayscale into the world's largest crypto asset manager, the CEO, Michael Sonnenschein, is stepping down. Joining us with the latest, Bloomberg's Shonali Basak, an interesting player coming to the fore to be the CEO. But in the meanwhile, I mean, it just says to pursue other interests. Why is Michael stepping down?
This was certainly an interesting piece of news. Of course, we know that Michael Sonnenschein had helped Grayscale bring the Bitcoin trust into ETF form. So it was a surprise here to see him stepping down. According to the Wall Street Journal's reporting, we have known that they were looking at Grayscale for a successor, a new CEO, since the end of last year. So before the ETF was even approved. In the statement in and of itself, you do have Michael Sonnenschein saying that the crypto asset class is at an important inflection point, and this is the right moment for a smooth transition. So who's the transition to? To your point, a Goldman Sachs alumni who was very senior in the leadership team running strategy at the asset and wealth manager, which is quickly approaching a $3 trillion assets under supervision over there over at Goldman Sachs. So you had Michael Sonnenschein come in to first institutionalize Grayscale in the Bitcoin business, but now you have an even more institutional asset manager coming in that has that kind of breadth of scale at a senior level at a large asset management firm.
Because how is ultimately Grayscale managing to fare against the competition? It still is the largest, but it's quite expensive in comparison to some of the other ETFs.
It's interesting. They're launching new products, so it'll be interesting to see what customers flock to at the end of the day. Their bet, which paid out at the end, was that even with some attrition, the higher fee structure than some of the newer products here would be worth it for them at the end of the day because their asset base is just so large. And of course, since the ETFs had launched for a significant period of time, they did experience net outflows, but more recently they have achieved net inflows on some days since we've seen the ETF first launched.
Now, this is all about the institutionalization of crypto. There is one key naysayer that remains in the market, and that is Jamie Dimon, even if JP Morgan more broadly is looking at the underlying technology and offering various crypto assets. But we understand Jamie Dimon is currently taking to the stage at his own tech conference happening over in Boston. He's got a lot to talk about when it comes to tech and AI, for example.
He sure does, and today is the company's own investor day that is happening, and of course investors are reading the tea leaves on how JP Morgan will invest moving forward. We just heard from their investment banking heads who said that they're about to invest across the entire venture ecosystem. So you have them really doubling down on their client base that is relegated to new technologies, and in and of their own right too, they're talking about this idea at the asset management side as well, that every new hire will get training in AI. Both sides of the business really pitching how much these investments in technology are increasing productivity per worker. They have things down to the specific amount of deals and volumes that you will get more in, say, for example, middle market banking from this use of technology. And in the asset manager as well, they kind of delineated here the junior level employees and the senior level employees and the different ways they're using AI to make those people's jobs more efficient.
It's going to be fascinating. The investor Investor Day upon us. We'll see what he has to say. Shanani Basak, we thank her for taking us through all the movers and shakers when it comes to, well, TradFi and perhaps slightly newer Fi. Let's talk about also what's been mentioning around artificial intelligence. And OpenAI has said it's working to pause the use of the Sky Voice from its outdated GPT-4o. And that's as users seem to be claiming that it sounded rather too like the actress Scarlett Johansson. Let's bring in Bloomberg's Rachel Metz for more, because there is a lot to be digesting when it comes to OpenAI, as always, Rachel. Let's start with perhaps, is this a stunt in some way? Is this actually moving on real pushback? I mean, at one point we had Sam Altman basically posting saying we all therefore anticipated that the voice sounded rather like Scarlett Johansson.
Yeah, I mean, so this is one of several voices that they have in ChatGPT in the app that they launched last year. And I mean, yeah, you could say it does have a bit of her sort of voice to it. I mean, it's a friendly sounding, female sounding voice. I think a lot of people, when OpenAI had its most recent event and it debuted its new model, started to say that they started to think that it sounded a little bit like that. It's one of these several voices, and they all sound kind of different.
Yeah, and it's worth saying that OpenAI says this isn't Scarlett Johansson, this is a totally different actress that it's been based upon, but we all think about that movie where, of course, someone falls in love with a female artificial intelligence product. But Rachel, what's also happening is quite a bit of tumult under the surface. You're reporting that, of course, the super alignment team disbanded after the two key executives that led it have left. And there's also a lot of talk about ultimately the pay of certain people over in OpenAI if they do indeed leave.
Yeah, there's a lot going on there this past week. So the super alignment team, to be clear, these are people that are thinking about how they would protect people against a superhuman type of AI. This is something that does not exist at this point in time. So let's just be super clear about that's what they're working on. OpenAI has multiple safety teams. This was one of them, and it was announced last year. Ilya Sutskever and Jan Leek, they were the two leaders, and Ilya left and then Jan left. This all happened last week in really quick succession. And in the wake of that, OpenAI said, you know what, we're going to be we're dissolving the team essentially and folding the people and the stuff that they were working on into other teams. As for compensation, yeah, there's definitely been some talk about what happens when people leave OpenAI, if they can talk about their experiences there, and if they may have some of their compensation taken away due to that.
Well, I know that you'll continue to report. I think many feel that, well, sometimes they're sucking up all the oxygen in the room where it comes to their products, and sometimes, of course, the teams who are building it. But Rachel Metz, we thank you for keeping us clean on all things OpenAI and what actually is happening from a product perspective there too. There it goes. Yesterday, Jeff Bezos' Blue Origin successfully relaunching its space tourism business 60 miles into the sky. This flight is Blue Origin's first tourist mission on New Shepard since all the way back to August 2022. Joining us to break down why and what they've got right this time is Bloomberg's Lauren Grush. And it was put on ice for a while after some technical issues, luckily, when there weren't actually traveling tourists on board.
Right. It's a site we haven't seen in a while. It's been a nearly 2-year hiatus for space tourism missions for Blue Origin. As you mentioned, last one was in August of 2022. And then the following month in September, they had an issue on one of their flights mid-flight. Luckily, no one was on board that trip, but they did have an engine failure that caused them to put flights on pause while they figured out what went wrong.
And let's talk about what went wrong and what therefore goes right now, because the aim is to have a bigger rocket. The aim is to not just be doing tourism some 60 miles up.
Right. So as Blue Origin investigated, they found there was an issue with an engine nozzle that caused the rocket to veer off course. They spent the majority of last year not launching, trying to figure it out, working with the FAA to redesign that nozzle and to put corrective actions in place. And then they ultimately did return to flight in December, but that was also an uncrewed flight. So this is the first time they actually put people on board. But yes, this is just a small part of Blue Origin's overall strategy. They have plans to launch an even bigger rocket called New Glenn that will go to orbit, later this year. That rocket has been delayed quite a few times, so it still remains to be seen if they'll meet that deadline. But yes, there are even grander ambitions on the horizon.
And maybe taking some competition to SpaceX, which really dominates in this field. It's notable that there's another delay, Boeing's own spacecraft being delayed, pushed back to what, May 25th now?
Yes, so we are on Starliner watch. Boeing's space taxi, the CST-100 Starliner, which is meant to transport NASA astronauts to and from the International Space Station, is supposed to be conducting its first crewed test flight, so sending 2 NASA astronauts to the ISS. And unfortunately, that launch has been a moving target. In fact, we were anticipating it happening as early as tomorrow, but Boeing found a helium leak that they are trying to figure out whether or not they can fly with it. And the current target time is Saturday, but again, this is an early crewed test flight, so it could possibly move again.
And it just reminds us, A, how difficult this is, but B, how expensive it is all as well, Lauren. And to that point, what is the ultimate goal? What sort of market share, GDP, are these companies trying to build, create, or indeed just take a chunk out of?
I think it's really just seeing if there is a market for people who want to go to space. I mean, what Blue Origin is doing is slightly different from what Boeing is doing. Boeing has a NASA contract, and so they have they're on the hook for sending NASA astronauts to the International Space Station. With Blue Origin, they're basically tapping into this new growing market of whether, wealthy tourists going to space and back. And, ultimately they could try and scale it up when New Glenn comes into the fold. But, it really is early days. And as we've seen, one small engine part can easily take the vehicle out of commission for over a year or so. So it just remains to be seen if this is an actual market that is lucrative, but we're finding out as the years progress.
One small nozzle issue, many months on ice. Lauren Grush, always on Space Watch. We thank you so much for it. Meanwhile, we're always on Share Watch for you. We just want to shine a light on what's happening with JP Morgan at the moment. Shares are under pressure at the moment. This, as well, we've heard from Jamie Dimon, the CEO. It's the Investor Day. We're just talking about it with Sonali Basak. Extending some declines after Jamie Dimon just talked about how expensive it would be, basically, to buy back stock. And he's saying he's not going to buy back a lot of stock at these prices. These prices dip a bit on the suggestion that there'll be less demand for buybacks. Meanwhile, sticking with, the stock market more broadly and some news, turning to breaking news from the New York Times. Ivan Boesky has died. Now, he inspired the Gordon Gekko character in the film Wall Street. He made a lot of money from insider trading, and he went to prison for his crimes. He was 87.